Hope everyone is doing well this morning. The time for convening has arrived. The Senate will come to order. At this time, I will ask all unauthorized personnel to exit the chamber. I'd like to recognize the senator from Coweta County, the rules chairman, for the journal, reading of the journal.
Well, thank you, Mr. President from Butts County. Good morning to you and everyone, and I just want to wish our pages a wonderful day, and thank you all for being here. We appreciate each and every one of you. And I'm going to go through our lineup today. We've got Bella Bermudez, Elizabeth Rucker, Olivia Rucker, Abigail Thompson, Emma Thompson, Faith Thompson, Ram Singh, Henry and James Floyd. I went to school with their mom and daddy. Ryan James, Rosalie Ellis, Henry Hanlon, Sarah Mack Roach, Blake Stewart, Anna and Daniel Wright, who are the children of our very own Gina Wright over in the redistricting office. And then Camille Floyd. Thank you to our pages. Look forward to working with y'all today, and we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. So y'all give them a big round of applause. Mr. President, I want to wish you a happy National Dog Biscuit Day, a happy National Toast Day, National Tile Day, National Chili Day, Diesel Engine Day, Pinocchio Day, Play Tennis Day, Tootsie Roll Day, and then, of course, everybody knows it's National Banana Bread Day. With that, the journal has been read and found to be correct.
I got to ask a question. Where do you get these, all these different days from? Do you just make them up? I'm always impressed. Senator. So thank you for that today. Is there objection to dispensing of the reading of the journal? Chair hears none, and the reading of the journal is confirmed. All senators who have bills and resolutions to introduce, please bring them to the Secretary's desk at this time. Have first reading and references to Senate bills and resolutions. Secretary?
Senate Bill 230 by Senator Barrasso of the 28th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to programs and protection for children, so as to revise. Senate Bill 231 by Senator Burns of the 23rd and Anderson of the 24th, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act providing for the consolidation of Richmond County.
Government.
Senate Bill 232 by Senators Kennedy of the 18th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to courts, so as to provide for
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 233 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to education, so as to provide for the establishment of promised scholarship accounts to be funded by the state in the amount.
Education and youth.
Senate Bill 234 by Senator Halpern of the 39th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to equipment and inspection of motor vehicles, so as to provide for the enforcement of laws regarding the operation
Public safety.
Senate Bill 235 by Senator Halpern of the 39th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to the Department of Community Affairs, so as to create the HBCU Innovation and Economic
Development.
Senate Bill 236 by Senator Setzler of the 37th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act creating the Board of Commissioners of Cobb County, approved June 19, 1964, as amended, particularly.
State and local government.
Senate Bill 237 by Senator Hatchett of the 50th and Hodges of the 3rd, a bill to be entitled an act relating to the Georgia Student Finance Authority, so as to provide for student loan repayment for peace officers.
Public safety.
Senate Bill 238 by Senator Hodges of the 3rd and Hatchett of the 50th, a bill to be entitled an act relating to the Georgia Board of Healthcare Workforce.
Health and Human Services.
That completes the order, Mr. President.
First readings of House bills and resolutions, please.
House Bill 121 by Representative Anderson of the 10th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to registration, operation, and sale of watercraft generally, so as to
Transportation.
provide. House Bill 167 by Representative Momtahan of the 17th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to limited driving permits for certain
Public
offenders.
safety.
House Bill 203 by Representative Newton of the 127th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to the control of hazardous conditions.
Health and Human
preventable-
Services.
House Bill 207 by Representative Rhodes of the 124th and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to general provisions relative to registration, operation, and sale of watercraft, so as to provide for the carrying of night visual distress signals.
Natural Resources.
House Bill 285 by Representative Franklin of the 160th and others, a bill to be entitled an act, the Public Retirement System Investment Authority Law, so as to raise the limit for the total percentage of
Retirement.
funds. House Bill 299 by Representative Thomas of the 21st and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to appointment, compensation, authority, qualifications, training, and other limitations of
Veterans.
associate. House Bill 317 by Representative Taylor of the 173rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act relating to the State Employees Assurance Department so as to provide for the assignment of certain group term life insurance benefits. House Resolution 157 by Representative Green of the 154th and others, a resolution authorizing the lease
State properties.
House Resolution 158 by Representative Green of the 154th and others, a resolution authorizing the granting of
State
non-exclusive. That completes the order, Mr. President.
No. Secretary will read reports of standing committees.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Government Oversight has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 19, due pass by committee substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Harbin of the 16th District Chairman. The Senate Committee on Health and Human Services has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 140, due pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Watson of the 1st District Chairman. There has been a minority report on Senate Bill 140 filed by Senator Butler. The Senate Committee on Higher Education has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 52, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 86, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 137, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Hickman of the 4th District Chairman. The Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 158, due pass. Senate Bill 76, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 160, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Walker of the 20th District Chairman. Senate Committee on Public Safety has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 10, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 78, due pass. Senate Bill 155, due pass by substitute. Senate Bill 217, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Albers of the 56th District Chairman. The Senate Committee on SLOGO has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. House Bill 156, due pass. House Bill 270, due pass. House Bill 272, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator again of the 47th District Chairman. The Senate Committee on Transportation has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 191, due pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Dolezal of the 27th District Chairman. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Second readings.
Senate Bill 34 by Senator Parent of the 42nd and others, food service establishment, third-party food delivery service from committing unfair, unsafe, and unhealthy practices in this state prohibit. Senate Bill 96 by Senator Anna Vitarte of the 31st and others, Professional Standards Commission. The Commission's standards and procedures for certification programs shall be neutral, provide. Senate Bill 97 by Senator Anna Vitarte of the 31st and others, Georgia Cyber Command Act. Georgia Cyber Command Division under the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency create. Senate Bill 99 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others, Certificate of Need requirements, exemption for acute care hospitals established in rural counties that meet certain criteria provide. Senate Bill 107 by Senator Burns of the 23rd and others, Izzy's Law. Department of Public Health shall develop and make available for download from its internet website a model aquatic safety plan based on national standards for private swim instructors provide. Senate Bill 115 by Senator McLaurin of the 14th and others, Georgia National Guard, the Adjutant General to be the official sponsor of the state-sponsored life insurance program provide. Senate Bill 116 by Senator Watson of the 1st and others, disposition of municipal property, the maximum term of certain leases or contracts for the use of property owned by a municipality for recreational facilities provisions. Senate Bill 132 by Senator Beach of the 21st and others, agriculture, the acquisition of possessory interest in certain land by certain non-resident aliens prohibit. Senate Bill 144 by Senator Islam of the 7th and others. Adjutant General include a roster of all commissioned officers in the organized militia. And the annual report to the governor remove the requirements. Senate Bill 145 by Senator Still of the 48th and others. Landscape Equipment and Agricultural Fairness Act enact. Senate Bill 162 by Senator Watson of the 1st and others. Health Certificate of Need requirements for all healthcare facilities except certain long care term facilities and services eliminate. Senate Bill 169 by Senator Payne of the 54th and others. Public schools extension of hearing dates for student discipline tribunals provide for limits. Senate Bill 170 by Senator Albers of the 56th and others. Students and Teachers Speak Act enact. Senate Bill 177 by Senator Jones II of the 22nd and others. Food Insecurity Eradication Act enact. Senate Resolution 123 by Senator Burns of the 23rd and others. Attorney General negotiate with the state of South Carolina terms of a reciprocal immunity agreement for officials of either state carrying out certain official duties urge. Mr. President, that completes the order.
It is now time for the morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Senator from the 33rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, y'all. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 41st for business outside the chamber.
Without objection, the senator from the 41st is excused. Are there any other motions to excuse? The secretary will call the roll of senators. Signify your presence by voting the yea switch. Secretary, unlock the machine. Counting. So, it is now time for the morning devotion. All senators, please take your seats and cease all conversation. I would ask the doorkeeper to secure the chamber at this time. It is my honor to have our senator from the 16th have our special pastor to today, but he's a gentleman that is no stranger to this body, Dr. George Dillard, an awesome gentleman, even better pastor, but he does a fantastic job in the Peachtree City, Fayette County area with all the different outreach program ministries that they have within their church, and he's one of those. He's been at his current church for almost 30 years, and he's really built it from the bottom up, and he's got an awesome congregation. They do a lot of good work, and it's always good to have him here in this body delivering the message that he always comes through for us, as I tell him. He's got a voice for radio. I always tell him that. He's got the best voice, and if you tune in to the Joy, was it 939 or 93.3, you'll hear some of his sermons on there. So, so it's good to have him, and I'll call on our senator from the 16th for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Can we stand for our pledge? American flag first. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our state flag, I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, and moderation, courage. Well, our Lieutenant Governor did a great job of already introducing, and Pastor George Dillard, Dr. George Dillard, is no stranger to our chamber. He is a phenomenal pastor and very involved in our community. He's been married for 35 years. He has 6 grandchildren, 3 children, and he said if he had known grandchildren were going to be so good, he'd been nicer to his children. He has a great love for one thing that we all have a love for, and that's the Bulldogs. He's a raving fan on that side, they say, so that portion. But you will enjoy him. He does a great job. He's on radio. People enjoy him there, but I always see him this. He's roaming Peachtree City in a golf cart with grandkids. And if you've ever been to Peachtree City, we have more golf carts per capita than any place in the country, and so it's a lot of fun. But with that, I will introduce our pastor of the day. Give us the words of wisdom, sir.
Thank you. Good morning. I told the Lieutenant Governor that I also have a face for radio. And my wife and I we will celebrate our 35th anniversary on March 26th. She said it seemed like 15 minutes underwater. Yeah, we're here this morning to, this body is here to take care of the people of the state of Georgia. I mean, that's your charge. My wife and I just recently returned from a trip where we were in Guatemala for a few days, and then we went to Rome, Italy. And you know, it's been my pleasure and honor over the years to travel to a number of different places. And one thing I've discovered is that people all over the world, when somebody does something good for somebody else, when they do an act of kindness, of service, they say that they're acting like what? A good Samaritan. It's a parable that Jesus told. And a lot of you know the parable that a man was traveling, he was robbed, he was beaten, he was stripped of his clothes and left for dead. And honestly, the short version of it, the 2 people that should have stopped and helped him didn't. And the one person that nobody in the crowd would have thought would have been the hero was. You see, the nation of Israel viewed the Samaritans as less than human. They were the scourge of the earth as far as Israel was concerned, and so nobody in that crowd, I guarantee you, most of the people, when Jesus was telling the parable originally, most of the people, when Jesus said, and along came a Samaritan, they thought, well, this guy's doomed. The Samaritan's going to finish him off. But I want to just take a moment and just point out 3 things from this parable that I think are maybe applicable to us and to this body today. The first thing is that the man who asked Jesus the original question that prompted the story, the scripture says that he was seeking to justify himself. In other words, he wanted to prove he was right more than being right. And I think when it comes to a body such as this, that it's more important to be right than to prove you're right, if you understand what I'm saying. Because you see, he didn't care whether he was right or not. He didn't care whether he was telling the truth. He didn't care whether he was honest. He just wanted to be right. And all that does is create division. But the second thing I'd like to point out is that when Jesus finally got through with the story, he asked him, so now who did what was right? And he said, the one who showed mercy to him. You know what? The Greek word that we translate into the English word mercy literally means benefit, which results from compassion, kindness. I would encourage you, the men and women of this chamber, to season your decisions and your deliberations and your intentions with mercy, to seek the benefit of the people of Georgia that results from your compassion and your kindness, your mercy. Because the third thing and the final thing that I'd like to point out is that Jesus looked at the man and said, well, you've hit the nail on the head, so to speak. So go and live in that way. You see, the heart of everything that we do is supposed to be, in fact, the scripture says everything God has ever said is built on these two truths: love God and love people. And the Apostle John says it's impossible to love a God that you cannot see when you don't love the people that you see every day. Now, last time I checked, there were no perfect people in this chamber. In fact, there's not one now. The only perfect one is Jesus. And that's, for me, my deliberations, my intentions, my purposes, is to show in some small way the love of God and the love of people. And I think when we have a body that is tasked with seeing to the best interest of all the people of Georgia, that would be a decent starting point. Would you join me in a word of prayer? Almighty God, maker of heaven and earth, the one who spoke all things into existence and the one who holds all things together by the power of your might. Father, help us to look to you for our wisdom, our clarity, our discernment, our strength, our courage. And Father, I would ask you today to bless the men and women of this chamber, not just so they will be blessed, but so that they might bless others and fill their hearts with compassion, kindness, mercy, and love, not only for you, but for the people of this state. We ask all of these things in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
It's now time to introduce the doctor of the day, and I call on our good senator from the 43rd District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I am honored to introduce the doctor of the day. Dr. Carmen Eccles is a board-certified family medicine physician. She received her bachelor's degree in biology from Xavier University of Louisiana in New Orleans, her medical degree from Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan, and completed her residency and internship in family medicine. She completed her residency and internship in family medicine at Georgia Health Services University in Augusta, Georgia. Her most recent physician experience includes the CAB Physicians Group's Flat Shoals Internal Medicine and Stonecrest Primary Care. She has served the DeKalb areas for 5 years. Dr. Eccles' special medicine interests include adolescent medicine. I think I'm gonna hit the gavel now, Mr. Lieutenant Governor.
Oh, yeah, she got a boy.
Let the church say amen. Dr. Eccles' special medicine interests include adolescent medicine, diabetes, hypertension, women's health, and integrative medicine. She is a member of the American Academy of Family Medicine, Georgia Academy of Family Physicians, and the Obesity Medicine Association. Dr. Eccles is a proud wife, mother, and dog owner who enjoys doing volunteer community service. She is in Junior League DeKalb with me. She loves West African dance, outdoors activities, attending cultural events and festivals, traveling, and gourmet cooking. She is my constituent, and today she will be my doctor as I go to take care of my voice. Dr. Eccles, please greet the senators.
Good morning, members of the Senate of the state of Georgia. It is my pleasure to be here this morning to serve you all as Doctor of the Day. And thank you very much for job well done for making Georgia a great state to live. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. That was quick. We have some special guests with us today, several special guests here. And Secretary, if you'll read the caption.
Senate Resolution 134 by Senator Anderson of the 24th and others, a resolution recognizing and commending Community Supervision Officer Lisa Garcia, the Department of Community Supervision 2022 Officer of the Year, and for other purposes. Whereas Community Supervision Officer Lisa Garcia has honorably served the state of Georgia for 23 years and has shown herself to be an outstanding embodiment of the department's core values of selfless service, accountability, integrity, teamwork, and professional development. And whereas Officer Garcia routinely goes above and beyond to provide efficient, effective, unselfish, and dedicated service to her coworkers in the state of Georgia. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend Community Supervision Officer Lisa Garcia on being named the Department of Community Supervision's 2022 Officer of the Year. That completes the order, Mr. President.
I now recognize the senator. Oh, excuse me. Hold on. Is there objection to the resolution? Chairing hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I now call on the senator from the 24th to introduce our special guest.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have two special guests here today from the Department of Community Affairs. We have the Employee of the Year, Ms. Garcia. And then also we have the Supervisor for the Year, Donna Moore. They have served us very well in the great state of Georgia for many years and have done a great job, and we just like to recognize them today. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the men and women of DCS and Donna and Lisa, very proud. They represent 2,000 employees responsible for 200,000 convicted felons in our community, and they do an outstanding job. But also want, on behalf of DCS, thank you for what you do to support us in our mission each and every day. I asked them what they wanted, so I'm giving their request. So they asked me to say, "Go Dogs."
Go Dogs, there you go.
All right. It is always good to have people down here who are very talented individuals, and we always have an array of talented individuals, but today we have a group from Coweta County and around the state, and that are artists, and I hear they're the best in the state is what I hear. So I'll call on the Secretary to read the caption.
Senate Resolution 43 by Senator Barrasso of the 28th and others, a resolution recognizing May 18th, 2023 as the Georgia World Organization of China Painters Day and for other purposes. Whereas the World Organization of China Painters is a non-profit group dedicated to the appreciation and enrichment of the fine art of painting on porcelain. And whereas this fine art, which requires great skill, training, and talent, has been enthusiastically adopted by thousands of porcelain artists from the state of Georgia for many years, and it is abundantly fitting and proper that they be appropriately honored during this special time. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize May 18th, 2023 as the Georgia World Organization of China Painters Day. Mr. President, that completes the order.
The adoption of the resolution, chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I call it. I didn't know we had fans in the gallery. So I call the senator from the 28th to introduce our special guest.
Thank you, Mr. President. It gives me great honor today to really introduce y'all to something I know very little about and didn't even know anything about it until one of my county commissioners, John Rattleback, who's up here with me today, brought this to my attention, and so I decided to bring them down here and just really kind of put a spotlight on something that probably many of you know very little about, and really that's Chinese art. And I know we got members in the gallery that have come. I think about 50 of them have come to help celebrate the day that we're going to celebrate, recognizing May 18th as Georgia World Organization of China Painters Day. So with that, I want to introduce the organization's president, Mary Bell Cordell, will come up to talk about this great organization.
Thank you so much. It's my honor to present to you some of the very, very fine porcelain artists from the state of Georgia. Believe it or not, there are just hundreds of China painters in the state of Georgia. And we paint on porcelain, and it's fired. It's an oil-based translucent paint, and it's fired in a kiln many, many times. And we are just very proud to have our special day, which is May 18th. We're having a convention and a luncheon in Conyers, Georgia, and to help celebrate. And we have about 8 or 9 different clubs in the state of Georgia. I'd like to introduce some of our outstanding artists who are with us today.
Hello, I'm Denise Reidelbach from Coweta County, and I belong to the Delicate Brush Porcelain Art Guild.
I'm Jean Hughes from Monroe, Georgia, and I belong to the East Suburbia China Painters.
I'm Lynette Peterson. I live in Fayetteville, Georgia, and I'm from the Delicate Brush China Club.
Thank you so much for this honor and for this special day.
There's one.
There's one more. Hey, I'm Birgit Porter. I am originally from Berlin, Germany, where I was a porcelain painter for the Royal Porcelain Manufactory in Berlin, KPM. Which was founded by King Frederick the Great. I am now living in Conyers, Georgia. I'm in a club there, and I am teaching the fine art of painting on porcelain nationally and internationally. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Good job. Good job. We had a group here today that was not on the agenda, but I decided after hearing the story that it needed to be on the agenda because of the heroics that were displayed by a couple of these men and women behind me here, and the young man who was a beneficiary of their heroics is here today as well. And I would like to call on the senator from the 39th to speak to the measure and the resolution. Do we have the resolution? Okay. Secretary, read the resolution, please.
Senate Resolution 187 by Senator Halpern of the 39th and others. A resolution recognizing the success of layperson CPR training and increasing the survival rate of cardiac arrest and supporting efforts to enhance public awareness of the need of such training and for other purposes. Whereas 2 Gainesville students may not be here today if it were not for the life-saving measures of Don Wales and the Gainesville City School staff who conducted immediate bystander CPR and used in-school defibrillators to provide electrical shock to a stopped heart. And now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body pause in their deliberations to commend the great work by this team of lifesavers from Gainesville City Schools in saving 2 students' lives by initiating CPR. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Calling the senator from 39th to speak to the measure.
Good morning. So yesterday we announced that today was CPR Awareness Day at the Capitol, and right now in room 230 CAP, we are doing CPR trainings and Stop the Bleed trainings as well. And so we're not only recognizing the importance of CPR training and AEDs, automatic external defibrillators, the availability and the training, but really the difference that they can make in lives right here in Georgia. 70% of cardiac arrests happens at home, 70%. Although that's a large number, having CPR training and the proper tools can truly save lives, and that is worth celebrating. Last April, when Colin Etheridge was in 7th grade at Brookstone School in Columbus, he suffered a cardiac event shortly after running up a flight of stairs in front of his classmates. Luckily, CPR-trained teachers and staff, who are right here, Linda Sheffield, Lucy Pound, Nate McConnell, and Johnny Ellerby, were close by. Not only did these rescuers alternate chest compressions until medics arrived, but they used the school's AED to shock Colin's heart twice. Did you know that only about 40% of people who experience an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest receive the immediate help that they need before professional help arrives? If those teachers did not know CPR training, a brave story could have turned into a tragedy. Colin's story is one with a happy ending, and I'm so glad that I can bring not only awareness of the importance of CPR and AEDs, but share this story of hope with you. Since then, Brookstone School has ensured that every teacher is CPR trained so that if anything like this happens again, the school will be well positioned to once again save a life. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to hear from Mom.
As a mother of a child whose life was saved because of CPR and AED, I know all too well the importance they play between life and death. Thank you for the opportunity to share our story, honor those that saved him, and bring more awareness to the importance of CPR and AEDs. Before my son's cardiac arrest, I did not know how to perform CPR, nor had I even seen an AED outside of the box. I know that if he had gone into cardiac arrest at home last spring, we would not have been able to save him. I urge each of you on this CPR and AED Awareness Day to take a few minutes and learn the life-saving skill of CPR and to know how to use an AED. You could be the difference between life and death for someone you love.
Are there any unanimous consents? Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? Senator from the 33rd, you wish to rise?
Thank you, Mr. President, my fellow senators, colleagues, friends, and y'all. Today, I'm up here with another Black History Moment spotlighting a member of our Georgia Senate. Today, we're looking at the senator from the 35th, Ms. Donzella James, who's a Democratic senator representing Metropolitan Atlanta 35th District of Georgia, which includes portions of Fulton and Douglas County. Senator James currently serves as the chairwoman of Urban Affairs. She is also a member of the Education and Youth, Special Judiciary, and Economic Development Committees. She has worked to bring progressive change in the area of crime reduction, a safe and clean environment, stronger drunk driving laws, and drug trafficking laws, economic development, increased access to affordable health care, and quality education. Drunk driving is near and dear to the senator from the 35th because she lost her son to a drunk driver one morning. And that's why she is a champion of that cause. Senator James is a distinguished and experienced lawmaker, having sponsored or co-sponsored more than 400 pieces of legislation throughout her tenure in the Georgia State Senate. I think I have about 40 and she has 400. What a difference. Senator James championed House Bill 89, a piece of legislation that gives local ordinance continued flexibility to incorporate drug-free commercial zones, undoubtedly making our communities safer places for Georgia families. Senator James has also championed veteran issues, dedicating a Douglas County bridge to Private First Class Melvin Johnson in his honor. He was the first African-American soldier to lose his life in the Vietnam War from Douglas County. A state senator with a passion for issues affecting those in need around the world, Senator James has led the charge to strengthen Georgia's relationship with the continent of Africa. With the passage of Senate Resolution 9 during the 2013 legislative session, she was instrumental in urging the Georgia Department of Economic Development to promote and strengthen beneficial ties with the African nations. She has traveled extensively to gain a better understanding of the humanitarian issues facing countries like Nigeria, Congo, Turkey, and Costa Rica, and South Korea. Senator James has earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and political science from Morris Brown University and an honorary doctorate degree from Macon's Emmanuel Bible College. As a child, she sat down at the knees of people like Hosea Williams and Martin Luther King, who affectionately called her their daughter. They baptized her with the spirit of the civil rights spirit, and she now brings that to the Senate every day. Thank you for this opportunity to highlight another matriarch of the Senate, senator from the 35th. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield well.
Thank you, Senator. What? Thank you, Senator, and I appreciate you saying those kind words about our friend and colleague. But I want to remind the next senators coming to the well that we need to try to keep our words at least 3 to 5 minutes, please. But we'll make a special exception for the good lady from the 35th here. So, Senator for the 56 points you'd like to stand for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I missed talking to the Rules Chairman this morning, but on this day in history, February 23rd, 1993, I was married to my wife, Carrie, 30 years ago today. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm very blessed. For the last 13 years, I've been in legislative session during our anniversary. She sacrifices an awful lot like all of the spouses in this room while we are down here serving or working in our districts or all the other time taken away from our family. So today, I just want to take a moment to my wife, Carrie, to thank her for being my soulmate, my best friend, and being by my side for these last 30 years, and I look forward to the next 30 years plus. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize the Senator from the 16th for appointed personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want us to welcome today. Today we have the Gordon State College from Barnesville, Georgia, which is in my district, home of the Highlanders. They're joining us. I don't know if we have any of them in the arena. Stand up if you're from Gordon College. Have we got anybody? I don't know if we do. Okay. And they've got 3,000 students. There's 12 of them here today, and these students represent multiple counties from Spalding, Pike, Henry, Lamar, and Clayton. They have majors in business, biology, criminal justice, and human services, has a great nursing program as well. And Gordon is had back-to-back NCFA football champions in 2021 and 2022. If you would welcome them as our future leaders. I don't know if we have them here, but thank you.
Recognize Senator from the 5th for appointed personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Oops, sorry. Good morning, colleagues. Today, I'd like to recognize February 23rd as the Egyptian American Day at the Capitol with this resolution. Recognizing February 23rd as Egyptian American Day at the Capitol and for other purposes, whereas the Egyptian American community has exhibited resilience and sacrifice in establishing the state of Georgia as a place to live, work, and thrive, whereas the Egyptian American community actively contributes to the ongoing welfare and continued prosperity of the state through community service and volunteerism, and whereas Egyptian American had achieved the highest level of leadership in business, healthcare, technology, education, and law, among other industries, and whereas the Egyptian American community has established a significant presence in the United States and the state of Georgia at large, embracing leadership role in assisting to create the next generation of Egyptian American leaders. And whereas it's abundantly fitting and proper to honor them, that more than 3,000 members of the Egyptian American community for their outstanding economic, cultural, and educational contribution and continued legacy in the state of Georgia. Now therefore resolved by the Senate that the member of this body recognize February 23rd as Egyptian American Day at the Capitol. Friends, there are few Egyptian American present here today in the gallery, and I'd like them to stand up and say I'd like to give them a big Senate welcome to Miriam, Wayne, Soma, and Khaladia, and Grant, and others. Thank you for all the great works that you will do for the state of Georgia. Thank you, appreciate it. I yield the will, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I think somebody lost their cell phone right there, but you moved them so strong, Senator, they went to throwing things. So no, but we'll get, whoever lost their cell phone, they get with the doorkeeper downstairs. We'll get it to you. So, Senator from the 37th, would you like to rise on point of personal privilege?
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I'd like to bring your attention to next Tuesday, the 28th of February, is Engineers Day at the Capitol. I'd like to invite you to a little gathering at 8 a.m. between 8 and 10 down in room 230. There'll be some young engineers and some folks from the American Council for Engineering Companies. My firm happens to be a member of ACEC. As you drive back home today, you drive over a bridge, thank a structural engineer. As you flush your toilet and things go fine, thank a civil engineer. As you turn the lights on, the lights come on, thank an electrical engineer. as we live in this climate-controlled environment where we can set the temperature exactly where we want it. Thank a mechanical engineer. Engineer Day at the Capitol is an important time for those in our state. They'll be visiting us on next Tuesday. We'd like to invite you to join us, 8 a.m., room 230. Thank you, Mr. President.
Recognize the Senator from 53rd for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's one of my favorite days at the Capitol. No, not because it's budget day, but because it's CTSO Day, Career Technical Student Organizations. We've got the executive directors and many of the state officers up in the galley, including from CTI, DECA, Skills USA, FBLA, FCCLA, FFA, FRC, HOSA, TSA. We got them all. And I tell you what, they're... Mr. Chairman over here, they're a very low budget investment and they make great returns for citizens all across the state. These organizations allow high school students to compete in like 50+ competitive events. You know, Mr. President, I tied my suit and tie this morning. I learned that in my time in CTSOs, how to eat with proper etiquette when I eat with those plastic badges outside. And I tell you what, when I speak, people listen a little bit more because of the skills that I learned in CTSOs. So if we can give them a round of applause, thank you for their hard work, the executive directors of CTSOs in Georgia. Mr. President, we're going to come get a picture with you. Thank you.
Senator, there is no question your skill set is unmatched and unrivaled. Senator from 43rd. I'd like to rise on a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise once again to acknowledge that today is Lupus Advocacy Day at the state capitol. Lupus is an acute and chronic lifelong autoimmune disease in which the immune system is unbalanced, causing inflammation and tissue damage to virtually every organ system in the body. Today we have guests in the gallery. Please stand. Thank you for your perseverance, your tenacity, and your ability to thrive in spite of your disease. God bless you and welcome to your state capitol.
Thank you, Senator. Would anyone else like to rise on a point of personal privilege? All right. You have before you a consent calendar of privileged resolutions. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? Senator from the 32nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate Resolution 192 be removed from the consent calendar.
Senator has moved that Senate Resolution 192 be removed from the local consent calendar. Is there any objection? Without objection, it is removed. We'll put it in rules. Is there any other objections? Chair hears none. The resolutions on the consent calendar are adopted. Are there any motions to withdraw and recommit? Senator from the 37th. Senator from the 37th. You know, Senator, we're getting all these problems, you know, with parliamentary procedures from these new guys from the House. Have you noticed that? All right, Senator, I recognize the senator from the 19th. The
Thank you, Mr.
penchant
President.
for the
On
senator
behalf-
from the 37th.
Yeah, on behalf of the senator from the 37th, I ask unanimous consent that Senate Bill 236 be withdrawn from the Committee on SLOGO and be recommitted to the Reapportionment and Redistricting Committee as general legislation.
Senator from the 19th has asked that Senate Bill 236 be withdrawn from SLOGO and reappointed to reapportionment. Is there any objection? That, without objection, read the caption.
Senate Bill number 236 by Senator Setzler of the 37th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act creating the Board of Commissioners of Cobb County approved June 19th, 1964 as amended, particularly by an act approved April 10th, 2014. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Okay. Is there objection to the motion? You object? You object. We have object. Would you like to speak to your motion? Well, you waive. Would you like for the senator from the 37th to maybe speak to the motion? So, all right.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is simply a bill that...
you need to come to the well, Senator.
Mr. President, thank you, members of the Senate. This is simply a bill that takes the exact same map that apportioned the county commission districts in Cobb County last year, and because there's been a little bit of a stir about who has the power to apportion county commission districts, would confirm that the legislature has that authority. It would repass the exact same map unchanged as was enacted into law and passed by the governor last year. The reason that we're asking for unanimous consent to do this, things on the consent calendar operate pursuant to consent. That can be pulled off by members. Rather than going through that process and back and forth, it's just simpler, in my view, to Mr. President, to put this in the reapportionment committee and streamline the process. With that, I would ask your support. And glad to yield for questions.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from the 6th, would you like to speak in your opposition?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. My objection to the motion is simply that the bill does involve changing the description of the duties and responsibilities related to being a Cobb County Commissioner, and that's something that should be handled by state and local governmental operations, particularly because this could potentially set a precedent that goes beyond Cobb County, so it's something that SLOGO should take a look at. And I yield it well. Thank you.
You do have a question, Senator. You do have a question, but you can yield it. Now, he's yielded well, Senator. All right, the motion is asking, the motion from the senator from Cobb County is asking that Senate Bill 236 be withdrawn from SLOGO and recommitted to reapportionment. He has objection from the senator from the 6th. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The ayes clearly have it. You ready now? You have before you consent calendar of local bills before you, and read the caption.
There are no objections filed to any of the bills on the local consent calendar.
Is there objection to agreeing to the report on committee on the state and local government operations, which is favorable to the passage of the bill on the local consent calendar. Chair hears none. Therefore, the committee has agreed to. The question is on the passage of the bills on the local consent calendar. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 49, nays are 0. This bill having on the local consent calendar, having received the requisite constitutional majority, are therefore passed. Moving on to the rules calendar. HB 18, Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill number 18 by Representative Burns of the 159th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act making and providing appropriations for the state fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2022 and ending July 30th, 2023, known as the General Appropriations Act. Committee of the Senate on Appropriations recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Tillery of the 19th District Chairman. Senate Appropriations Committee substitute to House Bill 18, a bill to be entitled an act to amend an act making and providing appropriations for the state fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2022 and ending July 30th, 2023, known as the General Appropriations Act, Act number 865, approved May 12th, 2022, so as to make, provide, and change certain appropriations for the operation of the state government and its departments, boards, bureaus, commissions, institutions, and other agencies. Mr. President, that completes the order.
I recognize our Appropriations Chair to speak to the budget. I know everybody appreciates the hard work that our good senator from the 19th has done and his staff. They put in a lot of hours over this budget, and they try to accommodate as many people as possible, but it is a tough job, and we just appreciate the work that he does. So.
Thank you, Mr. President. A lot of folks here today, and to be honest with you, lost my speech or lost my notes. So we got to go a little bit from scratch. Look forward to your questions that you may propose. That's not asking for them, but thank you for allowing me, first of all, to present to you the amended budget, House Bill 18, for FY23. Let me tell you a little bit about it. As you know, there's a little bit over $2 billion that are added in revenue to this budget. You'll see that that's in state general funds, it's about $1.9 billion. It's about 6.8% increase over last year, which is very much in line with inflation. If we look at inflation in 2021, it was roughly 7%. Inflation over the past 12 months has been 6.5%. So this is very much in line with where we've seen spending on a national level go after increased inflation that has been a 20 to 40 year high. When we developed this budget, you know that the Senate Appropriations Committee, the Senate Appropriations Chairman, does not develop it by himself or by herself. It is a process that involves a team. And that team that develops this budget is spread around the room right now. You know our Senate Budget Office staff. You know Brent, our director. You know our other analysts, whether it be Mary, Rachel, Lindsay, Caitlin, Austin. back at the office, Courtney. And if you don't mind, I would ask if you don't mind giving those guys a round of applause for the help that they've been to this process. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention our friends in the House who've already put their fingerprints on this bill, as well as our friends at OPB who started this budget process for this amended budget already back in July of last year. In the budget that you see before you, if you flip the page in the governor's budget book, if you flip to page 9 and 10, you'll see that the governor lays out his priorities. There's 30 items listed, about 17 bullet points, but if you break it down to roughly 30 items. The Senate's budget proposal matches 27 of those 30. So 90% of the governor's priorities that he listed in the amended FY23 are funded in the Senate's version. We also met our friends in the House on a variety of things, on out-of-home care concerning hoteling. We met them also on items in transportation with airport aid, with rail, with increases there. We've met them as we begin to continue to employ strategic raises for employees. But the Senate, of course, does have its differences. The differences were made by you, senators, who brought projects from your district, projects that you heard from your constituents that mattered, and you've included them in this process. I want to run over just a few of the big items that you'll see in the budget as a whole. The governor's original budget proposal, he has 3 big items that are roughly $3 billion. The homeowner tax relief grant, that's $1 billion refunded to Georgia homeowners to help offset the cost that they've seen an increase due to inflation and rising home value prices, which in turn turned into a rise in the millage rates. The governor also had $1 billion in proposals of refunds and rebates. This budget recognizes that, although you will see it reflected in the FY24. And this proposal includes well over $1 billion to backfill motor fuel funds that were suspended by the governor last fiscal year due to record inflation, and to give not only homeowners and Georgia citizens, but Georgia businesses a little bit of a break at the pump. The differences that you may see in our budget are really policy-based or potentially information-based, and there's 2 big ones. We've made a change at AU that some of you have brought up. The governor's original proposal was $105 million for a computer system there. Through some information, our number moves that to roughly $50 million. There's $10 million also kicked in by USG. Our budget also makes a small change at economic development. We pull $1 million out that we previously had funded for other items, and through a reappropriation or reallocation of funds, we clawed back our $1 million there. If you flip through the budget and you look just generally at some other big items, I'll hit them for you. You'll see that the Senate's going to add $541,000 in Senate funds. That's just to keep parity with the House. Walking on down through the budget later, you'll see additions that we've made at the Department of Behavioral Health. We know that we're going to need to increase bed space and keep PTRFs and other beds open as they relate to mental health. Also to give breaks at our prisons, because we know that housing these individuals with mental health needs in prisons isn't necessarily the best thing. It's not the best for them. It's not the best for state dollars. And we need to have crisis beds open so that those will be open when we need them. At DCH, when you get to the DCH items of the budget, you'll see some increases in Medicaid. Those are related specifically to just numbers that, as we ran the numbers, we saw some additions that were needed there. You'll also see some changes at corrections, where the governor had roughly $51 million in funds at corrections. The House plussed that up to 56. The Senate plusses that up another $5 million. And all of those improvements throughout corrections, and also you'll see them some in GEMA, are related to technology improvements to making things safer, not only outside of the prison, but inside the prison, and using technology to do that. In our TCSG budget, you'll see that the Senate does fund one new startup facility for TCSG in Bryan County. That matches the House decision there. In our DOE budget, you'll see that the Senate returns to the governor's position of $50,000 per school on school grants, rather than the move that the House had made previously. Right below that, though, you'll see that we also go and add back monies for learning loss. But the Senate has a slightly different twist on that learning loss funds. While the governor's original proposal was to help schools who were showing a need and a discrepancy in learning loss related to the pandemic. The House position was to take $977 million that had already been authorized through ARPA funds and direct the school systems to use those instead. The Senate's proposal takes those ARPA funds, ties it to the $25 million, and says, let's reward the schools who best deploy that $977 million. We also have different adds in our Department of Natural Resources budget. You'll see $11 million there for state parks, parks, and outdoor recreation. You'll see other adds at USG, and a lot of those changes are related to pulling bonds forward. As it's been reported, and I said in committee, I think the 23 budget has a little bit more playroom, a little bit more wiggle room for us as legislators than the 24 budget. I think really that the 23 budget will be easier, the 23 amended. So to help us as we begin to fund items in 24 and preparing for what we're seeing nationally as a slowdown, we grabbed some of the items that the governor's budget bonded in the 24 budget and moved them to cash. Most notably, a facility at Ogeechee Tech in Statesboro, a bond on Ag Hill in Athens, Clark County, and other equipment projects that we could move forward as well. I know you guys have had several weeks to look these documents over in committee and subcommittee, and now several days and a whole week to look it over now. I want to tell you thank you for your efforts to develop this budget and turn it into what it is. It reflects what you brought to us as concerns from your district. It reflects the concerns you brought to us concerning projects at the Department of Transportation and wanting to make sure that your projects on list continued to move there. $50 million was set aside to help with those matters. We also did increases at the GBI. We're hoping that those increases related to not only safety, but also related to funds decreased as at GCIC will allow us to fulfill not only our constitutional duty to balance a budget, but our duty as legislators to keep families safe. So, Mr. President, thank you for allowing me to present to you House Bill 18. If there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
You do have some questions, Senator. Senator from the 50th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Chairman, I'm aware that at certain points in time we were asked to take a haircut on the budget. Did anybody mention to you about shaving for the budget?
We'll shave when the budget passes, Senator, so thank you very much.
Senator from the 15th, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Yes, sir, to the Dean of the Senate.
Sir. Just a quick question, Mr. Chairman, regarding under criminal justice and public safety, that item, there's an add of $1.5 million for gang case-related analytics.
Yeah.
How would that affect counties and Muskogee County and places like that for them to be able to fight gang-related issues that cropping up in some of our counties?
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Dean. I thought it was 1.7, but if you've got 1.5 and I don't have my notes, then I'll trust you on that one. What that is meant to do is we know that we have different law enforcement agencies that are fighting gangs all across our state. What we can do is use technology, though, to improve the access to information for all of those agencies. A lot of that will be coordinated through the Georgia Bureau of Investigations and at GEMA. And we're wanting to make sure that we've provided the funding necessary that as they, without saying too much about it, as gangs move on in the ways that they do, that we're trying to stay at the front cutting edge to respond to what they're doing in our communities using technology.
Okay. Senator Yield, one more final for clarification.
Yes, sir.
If they move from, say, Fulton County to Taylor County, something like that, that kind of information would follow to bolster the law enforcement people in that jurisdiction. Right?
Well, it would be able to, yes, sir, especially if it's coordinated either with GBI or GEMA.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, if there are no further questions, I'll yield the well.
Senator from 42nd, are you wishing to ask a question or come to the well? Okay. No more questions, Senator.
Thank you.
I recognize Senator from the 42nd.
Thank you. Mr. President. Appropriating is arguably the most important work we will do this session and every session. The budget is about more than dollars and cents. It's about values, priority, and common sense. As we talk through a labyrinth of budgetary details, we do need to consider thoughtfully how we allocate our precious resources, our constituents' hard-earned tax dollars and federal funds to meet the needs of our great state. There are no shortage, as we all know, of worthy programs and services to fund, and our budget is not unlimited, and we cannot do it all. We have a surplus this year, thanks in part to increased revenues, conservative budgeting, but also low revenue estimates and austerity measures from prior years. And at times, we have failed to fully fund some critical programs. We need to act wisely now to invest in Georgia's future. When we speak of investment, we think of costs, fixed and variable, one-time and ongoing, dividends and returns. But these are not the only tools that we can or should use to evaluate the merits of one need over another. In some cases, our expenses are mandates, non-negotiable, virtual mandates. We must keep our state government functioning, keep our schools and courts open, operate agencies that serve a broad array of needs, and ensure our law enforcement are ready and prepared. Other expenses are choices we make. We could do better sometimes to evaluate these choices by analyzing the return on our investment. The senators from the 56th and 52nd, among others, have been pushing for robust analyses so we can make well-informed decisions. Then we have a bucket of expenses that we make, a bucket of appropriations that we make based on our values. What do we spend on our children? And how does this compare to what other states spend? Do we pay our teachers and law enforcement well compared to other states, compensating them fully for the value of their hard work? This, my friends, is where the rubber meets the road, as they say. I want to thank the Appropriations Chairman for his hard work, as well as all the chairmen of all the subcommittees, as well as the governor, and all the staff in the Senate budget offices and House budget office. But I want to make a plea today. We can do better as we consider the fiscal year 2024 budget in funding services for our youngest Georgians who are struggling to read, that basic skill that in so many ways will dictate whether or not they can succeed in life. We must fund Senate Bill 48. In 2019, when we passed Senate Bill 48, it says school systems beginning in the 2024 to 2025 school year, local school systems shall screen all kindergarten students for characteristics of dyslexia and may screen first through third graders as well as screening for other disorders. So as we take up the fiscal year 24 budget, let us keep the requirements of SB 48 passed by this body, the House, and signed into law by the governor in 2019 front of mind. The basic skill of reading is the most essential step to developing a workforce to power our economy and consider for children who are more likely to read are less likely, much less likely to join gangs. We just need to do what we said we were going to do and fund the dyslexia screener, which is up to 25% of children who struggle with this neurodivergent pathway. Let's not fail them. Let's do what we said we were going to do in 2019 as we take up the 2024 budget. We funded the pilot program. The budgetary cost is approximately $8.6 million, which seems a drop in the bucket for something so critical. The immeasurable return in productivity, physical and mental health, and competitive pride. Mississippi is beating us big time in this area right now, and none of us like that. If we want to keep our prized position as a great place to live and do business, we must make this critical investment. We can do better, and we will do better, right here, right now. And again, I want to thank the chairman of Education and Youth and Higher Education for the literacy study that has been ongoing this session. But let's not forget what we said we were going to do with our dollars. There is no more meaningful investment, and we can't let it go a whole other year. Let's fulfill the promise of SB 48 and fully fund the dyslexia screeners in the 24 budget as we take it up. Thank you, Mr. President. If there are no questions, I will yield the well.
You do have a question, Senator. Senator from the 53rd, you wish to, you want to speak? Okay, so you have no questions, Senator.
Thank you. I yield the well.
I recognize the Senator from the 53rd.
Hey, Mr. President, I appreciate the well. I tell you what, I said earlier today my favorite time of day was recognizing CTSOs, but I tell you what, I like selling stuff too as an auctioneer, and we've got something big to sell today. We have $6 billion in surplus revenue. All right, what do you say here? Don't better hear about it. It's been well advertised. We all know $6 billion. I tell you what, if that ain't enough money to spend today, no problem. All you got to do, walk across the street there at Trinity, and you'll find the Office of Bonds, the Finance Department. We've got some of those folks here in the room. They'll get you right fixed up, ready to go. 6.5% will be your interest rate. All right, what do you say here? Now going to be down $30 billion. And now $30 billion going to be down 35 here, Mr. Chairman. I got you. $35 billion want to be 40. And now $40 billion going to be down 50. $50 billion, and they got the Democrat in the back now. $50 billion going to be down 60. $60 billion on a bidder. He to buy him $60 billion. Lord have mercy, you're going to bid $60 billion? My goodness, Mr. President, there's people in this room who'd spend $60 billion if they had it. I can't imagine what $60 billion would look like. That'd double the taxes of every Georgian, would it not? $60 billion, we're at 32 today. Mr. President, I add some humor to what I'm about to say in the spirit of moderation in our state, a fine principle of our state, moderation. Because what I'm about to say is hard to hear, and trust me, it's hard to say. You know, I don't think that the position of our state when it comes to finances is any fault of the chairman of appropriations of the 19th. It's not the fault of the governor. They're all doing their jobs. The finances of this state is brought to us by this body and the body across the way. Now today, I'm going to object to the budget, if that's not already clear. I'll probably be the only red sign up there. Mr. President, I find it kind of humorous because when you look at Communist China and their big General Assembly, it's all the same when they vote. But our only constitutional duty in this state is to pass a budget. That's it. All the regulation that we bicker about in this room, that's not necessary. All the mandatory minimums we bicker about in this room, that's not necessary. But this budget, how we spend the dollars, that's necessary. I tell you what, Mr. President, we always hear in this chamber that we're the #1 state to do business in. But I tell you what, you go back to Northwest Georgia and you start telling that to folks and they'll laugh at you because they'll look across that border and they don't see any income taxes. Mr. President, sometimes, and this is a true story, I was talking to a merchant in Northwest Georgia who was loading up one of these big rigs, 90,000 pounds gross vehicle weight. He was loading up his inventory to ship it out of state because he didn't want to pay inventory tax. Now, granted, our state doesn't have inventory taxes, but our counties are so broke in Northwest Georgia that they'll tax you. They'll tax that inventory right away. But, Mr. President, that truck driver who was going to haul that inventory out of the state to avoid those inventory taxes, he didn't stop at the convenience store in Georgia to buy his fuel. He drove on into Tennessee to fill up because their fuel tax is lower than ours here in Georgia. And, Mr. President, I'm good friends with a fellow who sells truck insurance in Northwest Georgia. All of his employees, all of his business happens in Tennessee because none of his employees want to work in Georgia and pay an income tax. You know, one of the solutions to heavy tax in this budget is $1 billion as a rebate to homestead exemption. Mr. President, you can walk outside of this chamber, and before long, you're liable to bump elbows with a county commissioner. And let me tell you what, those county commissioners up in Northwest Georgia, they like taxing folks. So citizens who receive that rebate check, they might as well just sign the back of it and give it right back to the government because the government's going to tax them anyway. But you can't blame the commissioners. They've got to do a job. Mr. President, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I took a tour of a county jail, and what I discovered there was horrendous. About 40% of the inmates there were all on state probation violation. You know, we can say we're going to try to solve crime. We can just, you know, pass all these mandatory minimums we want, but when they get into court and they start making plea bargains, they end up being probation violations, and guess who takes care of the burden? It's not the state, it's our county jails. Another 40% or so, well, they suffer from mental illness. Mr. President, the county taxpayers, in some instances, are paying $1,000 a week per inmate for medication. And that's all on the county taxpayer. And I feel sorry for our sheriffs because they can't recruit anybody. You know why they can't recruit anybody? They're constitutionally mandated to do jobs for us as a state, but we can't offer them any medical retirement. Mr. President, we got Eighth Amendment violations happening in jails across this state when it comes to mental health. We can't offer anything else. Mr. President, about 5 years ago, when talking about law enforcement, we had about 65,000 law enforcement officers across the state. That's state troopers, that's sheriff's deputies. Now we're down to about 45,000. Population's grown by about 1 million. So you'd think if we're worried about gang and crimes, we would get some more law enforcement officers to enforce the laws that we already have. Mr. President, we've got an immigration crisis at the border, and it's found its way into Northwest Georgia. Our executive branch goes to the world stage and says, secure the dang border. But there's no money in this budget. We got $6 billion left over, and we're not doing anything to stop the cartels coming out of Mexico. You see, we like to find solutions to the evident problem. It's like kudzu growing in Northwest Georgia. We need to go after the root of the problem, Mr. President. But just to equal, think about our state troopers. You see, there was a state trooper in Northwest Georgia who was traveling up 75 not too long ago chasing a felon down. He broke his neck in the line of duty. The best the state can offer him in medical retirement is insurance and $1,100 a month. That's all we got. Because we had some austerity cuts back in 08 and 09, and we've never recovered that medical retirement. You see, we've got a historic surplus, but we're not doing many historic things with that surplus. Mr. President, equal to public safety is transportation. I'm honored to serve on the Transportation Committee in this Senate. And I've been to the Chamber of Commerce events, and I've heard the big wigs of transportation, the guys who sell the rocks, the guys who sell the concrete and the asphalt. All of them tell me the cost is going up 40%. But I don't see in the next budget our expenditures in transportation going up 40%. You see, to me, transportation is probably the most important thing we could ever do in a state. Look at the ancient empires, this temple that we stand in today, right? It looks like one of those ancient temples that the statesmen debated in back in the day of the ancient Syrians. They spent every tax dollar they had on infrastructure. The Romans, they spent it on infrastructure. Ever heard of the Roman road? Mr. President, my constituents are upset about some simple stuff, and I'm sure all of you have constituents upset about some simple stuff. What do I mean by simple stuff? I mean things like caution lights. There's 4 or 5 caution lights in Northwest Georgia, Mr. President, that citizens have been asking for since I served in the House across the way. $50,000 expenditure. I go to the Commissioner of Transportation. He said, it's not a financing issue. It's an engineering issue. Well, I beg to differ then if it's a financing issue. We need more money to hire more engineers to take care of this simple stuff. That's the proper role of government. If we don't have those caution lights, we've got fatalities. Legitimate fatalities, and we continue to ask for those caution lights. You see, people expect the government to work for them. They don't expect to work for us. University System of Georgia has produced professors who have written articles, white papers, well studied, that say $250 of every tax dollar a Georgian sends in now goes to subsidize the film industry. You see, Mr. President, the poor folks in Northwest Georgia, all they can afford is to send me to advocate for them. They can't afford a bunch of bigwig plastic badges outside to advocate for them. They're sick and tired of paying high taxes just to subsidize big corporations. You see, they're billion-dollar industries, and they're writing and making movies about death, and we're paying for it as taxpayers, but yet we've got death on our roads because we can't afford caution lights. Mr. President, I think it's ironic that I'm the youngest member of this chamber, and I seem to be the only one worried about our interest when it comes to debt. You got a big budget there on your desk, and I challenge any of you to go in there and find how much interest we're paying on our bonds. I took a trip across Trinity, and it was mighty difficult to figure it out. We know we've got about $9 billion in bonds. We know we're paying anywhere from 2 to 6.5% interest on those bonds. At the max, that'd be $650 million a year, would it not? Imagine all the things we could do with $650 million extra dollars we weren't paying interest on. But what's ironic is what I hear is we have billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars in tax liabilities. Not just the film industry, but all across the board. And it just seems like if there's about $8 billion in tax liabilities and we've got $10 billion in debt, we've just borrowed a bunch of money to subsidize a bunch of corporations, and we've forgotten what is the proper role of government. Mr. President, this is an historic budget, $6 billion. I don't think that's ever happened. And we're not doing meaningful things to lower the cost of living in Georgia. We're going to give a one-time government gimme handout, a little payola to the citizenry. But, Mr. President, that doesn't help my kids. That doesn't help my grandkids. And I ask that you consider these things before you vote. Mr. President, I will be voting no today, and those are the reasons why. And I yield the well. Thank you.
Senator from the 56th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to remind the folks in the gallery that that is not a place that we can make any noise or clap. I appreciate the comments made by everybody today, but let's also take a look at this from a different perspective. We have one of the most fiscally responsible states in the entire nation. I would urge you to look at all the other states and how much they're spending by their population. The amazing work that Governor Kemp, our very own Lieutenant Governor, our Chairman of Appropriations did to suspend the gas tax that made a real difference in people's lives, that spent a big portion of that surplus. Property taxes, which have gone up extraordinarily high to help folks out, and their income taxes. We have made historic investments in public safety that many of us have spent our blood, sweat, and tears on doing over the last decade. Can we do more? The answer is always yes, but we also have to be responsible to the overall budget. I think that those of us who actually have been a part of this process for some time understand that all things come with balance. And here in Georgia, we have a balanced budget. And it's through the hard work of the men and women here, across the hall, our Lieutenant Governor and Governor, who make that happen each and every day. So thank you, Mr. Chairman of Appropriations, Lieutenant Governor and Governor, for giving us a good balanced budget, and we do, in fact, lead the nation in our fiscal responsibility. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection of the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54 and the nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Senator from the 19th, what purpose do you rise?
Make a motion, Mr. President.
State your motion.
I move that the Senate immediately transmit House Bill 18 to the House.
The senator has moved that the Senate immediately transfer HB 18 to the House. Is there objection? Without objection, it is immediately transferred to the House. Moving on, Senate Bill 63. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 63 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 6 of Title 17 of the OCGA relating to bonds and recompenses so as to provide for settling of bonds and schedule of bails. The Senate Committee on Public Safety recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Albers of the 56th District Chairman. Senate Public Safety Committee offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 63, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 6 of Title 17 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to bonds and recompenses so as to provide for setting of bonds and schedule of bails, to provide for release of individuals on bail for misdemeanors, to limit unsecured judicial releases, to revise surety liability. Mr. President, that completes the order.
I recognize a senator from the 29th. Speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senate colleagues, I stand before you today with the second half of bail bond reform that we started 2 years ago. I want to remind everybody that every day in this building, like places like it throughout this country, we have elected officials, special interest groups, and others attempting to pass bills, change laws, and hand down executive orders designed to expand protections and create new rights for those who choose to go out and violate the laws. We have seen in Georgia over the past few years, our crime rates continue to rise, and rise. And as they rise, the majority of the time, the elected officials of the cities choose to make exceptions for it. And with every exception made, crime continues to go up. In my own community, over the past weekend, 5 young people were shot standing in the parking lot of a Shell station after a child's birthday party. I would love to tell you this is an anomaly in the state of Georgia, but it's not. And as we start looking at the numbers, we realize that the individuals going out and committing these crimes, whether it's aggravated assault, whether it's murder, whether it's stealing an auto, whether it's criminal trespass, or whether it's burglary or simple theft, these are not new criminals. These are not people that woke up that morning and decided to go out explore the world of breaking laws. The vast majority, based on numbers from Atlanta and throughout the state of Georgia, are recidivists. They're individuals who the system has been kind to. They're individuals who the system has said, you know what, we understand. Life wasn't fair to you. Life was tough, and so you're going out there and doing what you have to do. Well, I want to tell you, I'll say my name. I'm Senator Randy Robertson, and growing up, life was tough on me. Things were hard. I watched my mom work 2 jobs. I watched my mother put me and my sisters through school. And you know what? Not one of us ever had to wear a pair of handcuffs. Not one of us ever had to run from a crime that we had committed. Our system is set up, and it is fair, and it takes care of individuals. But all of these laws and expansion of rights that we see passed around, they're for those who choose to go out and break the law. What we don't hear about is the expansion of rights and protections for the victims of crimes. We don't hear about protecting the individuals who come home from work and find that the assets that they have accumulated by working hard have been taken away. And in a lot of communities, that's considered a nonviolent crime, and those individuals are allowed to walk out. And so what this bill does is it puts some rights back into the lives of those individuals who are victims of crimes, so that they know that the perpetrators who broke into their lives and either injured them or took something from them, that they have to have a little skin in the game in order to get back out of jail and go out and do what they do. Now, the primary focus in the second half of this bail bond reform, SB 63, focuses on crimes and violations related to domestic terrorism. I want to thank the fine gentleman from Senate District 46 who several years ago had the insight to realize that domestic terrorism at that time was a problem and would most likely continue to be a problem. Therefore, he went in and took part in the legislative process and made sure that domestic terrorism was defined in Georgia Code so that law enforcement and community leaders could address it when it happened. Well, we know it's happening. It happened right here in the city of Atlanta when some individuals decided they did not want the city of Atlanta to expand their law enforcement training. So they went out and they violently attempted to prevent the city of Atlanta from carrying out what they rightfully should have done. They burned police cars, they drew weapons on law enforcement officers, and they were arrested. And some of them arrested more than once. So we're addressing that in this legislation. And this legislation, not only does it protect the victims of crimes, but it protects those in law enforcement who go out and protect those who are victims or potential victims. And I want to tell you something. When I speak about law enforcement law enforcement and public safety is not a crutch that I pick up on the way in the door to present legislation. I don't pick and choose to support law enforcement when it's convenient for me. I don't choose to stand with public safety, whether it's law enforcement, fire, EMS, or paramedics, when I think that it's a good thing to say that may help me get my bill down the road. I protect it because the Georgia Constitution says our #1 responsibility is to protect the citizens of this state. And this legislation does that. And those who stood with us 2 years ago when we passed the first half of this, I look forward to voting with you today as we close the circle and close the gap and protect the citizens of Georgia in the way that we're sworn to. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the well.
We do have an amendment, and before I call on the senator from the second, we'll read the amendments.
Senator Mallow of the 2nd District offers the following amendment to amend Senate Committee Substitute to Senate Bill 63 by striking lines 100, 101, 102, 107, 108, 122, 126, 127, and 128. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize the senator from the second to speak to the amendment in the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, today I rise to talk about what it's like to address those who are poor and impoverished, who tend to make a bad decision. Now, this may not seem like a big deal for folks, but I want to just talk about the folks who may commit an offense that could have been a citation, that now they're going to be arrested, have to go down to the jail, be booked, be processed, and have to have somebody to post their bail for them to get out of jail. Might be 1 day, might be 2 days, might be 3 days before somebody shows up to get them out of jail. Well, most employers, if you don't show up in the next 24 hours, you're no call, no show. You're terminated. Now this individual that could have gotten a citation for a simple offense has lost their employment. Next thing they're going to lose is their housing. Next thing they lose, their transportation. And so when we talk about addressing the cycle of crime in the state of Georgia, this bill will perpetuate more people being conducive to crime because they don't have the opportunity. They lost that opportunity because they sat in jail because nobody would bond them out. Being poor shouldn't be a sentence to have to sit in the jail in this state. And in fact, we don't want crime to happen, but we should also look at the same apparatus to help folks make better decisions. But if I'm going to lose everything from having to sit in jail for something as simple as a criminal trespass, colleagues, I think we can do a little bit better than that. Theft by taking and criminal trespass on line 100, just the intentional damage of property, $500 or less. If you walked in any senator's office and had a disagreement and knocked something off their desk, you could be charged with criminal trespass. We've all been angry and upset at one point in time, but it shouldn't be a reason for us to be arrested and have to go to jail to bond out for 3 days. So for those Georgians who don't have the affluence and influence, that can't pay for a good criminal defense attorney, that are just hardworking people that got upset one day and had a bad day, they got to sit in jail and lose everything that they worked hard for. So then you perpetuate them to a further life of crime because guess what? If I don't have it, I got to make it by any means necessary. Simple things in this bill could be addressed simply as the failure to appear. You could be arrested and now have to bond out on failure to appear. How many of you ever got a traffic ticket and forgot about it? That's failure to appear. You could be arrested for that, have to bond out of jail. Are we really thinking about it? I want the most violent people to be off our streets, but I want to make sure that I give the opportunity for those who are poor and impoverished to have an opportunity to not have to spend their entire week or month in jail and lose everything they got, because what they have is sometimes only a little bit. Line 126 describes this in a fray. Two people can get in a disagreement and have a fist fight. That's an affray. I fought a lot of people in my time growing up in the hood. We didn't use guns, we used these. And now, if I did use these, I could be charged with an affray, have to go to jail. Then I look at unlawful assembly. Most folks, especially folks in my community, are afraid to be arrested by a law enforcement officer, and they run, they do things because they're afraid of going to jail, because they don't know how they're going to get out of jail. And if you haven't seen, the criminal justice system is backlogged. I have had people in my county jail sitting in the jail for a long time if they couldn't bond out. When we look at bond, we really have to have the conversation of the people that we want to stay in jail and the people we want to get out of jail, right? Because if you do commit a serious violent felony, you can get a high-paid attorney. You can go before the Superior Court judge and petition for a bond. But if you're poor, buckle up, sit in jail, hope you figure it out next week. Lastly, when I look at the terroristic acts on line 128, many of us have had strange phone calls as related to the elections in 2020 and 2022. Some of the folks weren't too nice on the other end of the phone. Some of those folks may have been your constituents, outraged that they believed that the election had been compromised and stolen. They said some pretty nasty things to you that could be construed as a terroristic threat. Are you going to lock all those constituents up? Are we going to apply the law and justice equally to everybody? Colleagues, I ask that you consider my amendment that I placed on your desk today and vote in favor of it, because we should make sure that we can uplift the most vulnerable people in our community. And I don't live in Atlanta. I live in Chatham County. I represent 4 municipalities. And in my 4 municipalities, I got rich folks, poor folks, I have black folks, I have white folks. But one common denominator that we all have in all our districts is we do have poor folks. And so when you think about somebody having to sit inside of your county jail, think about how those folks are going to get out. And if they don't have an opportunity, they'll be back to come see you again. So when we look at it, let's think about the folks that we're mad at, and let's think about the folks that we really want to send away for a long period of time, and just be conscious about our efforts in this body. Colleagues, I just ask for your favorable consideration on that amendment, and let's just have some common sense and some debate about the issues so that we don't penalize people in a temporary situation. We've all made decisions that were temporary. Let's not make it permanent where they lose life, liberty, and opportunity. And with that, Mr. President, I will yield the well.
Recognize Senator from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, colleagues. This is a polarizing issue. We've all got our politics, right? If you're in a super safe blue district, you're progressive, you're a reformist, you know, you want to do criminal justice reform, those are words that come out of your mouth. If you're in a safe red district, it's tough on crime, it's addressing increasing crime rates, and you know, whether it's in your city or Atlanta, maybe, if that's a special pet project. But it's a polarizing issue, and what I wish is that we could get to a point where we were talking about nuts and bolts, what's actually at stake here, what is cash bail about, what is the best policy. The Senate is said to be deliberative, so that's the spirit in which I come to you today. The senator from the 2nd spoke of the difference between being mad at somebody and being afraid of somebody. And those are not the senator from the 2nd's original words. Those words belong to a former governor, Governor Nathan Deal. He invited us as a state to think about how we could do criminal justice reform in a way that didn't just accomplish the progressive ends of reform and being humane and giving people a second lease on life, but that they also accomplish the purposes of the Safe Red District, to be tough on crime, to improve public safety. Because what he realized is that those talking points on each side of the aisle are shared by voters of all political persuasions in every district. We all want to accomplish the most humane way to improve public safety, reduce crime rates, and make sure that everybody has opportunity. So I would invite you senators today to think about what we are really doing with this bill. This bill is a snapshot. It is one move, albeit a pretty substantial move, in the direction of increasing the use of cash bail as a primary means of trying to reduce crime. The problem is that cash bail uses the most blunt weapon that we have to try to attack crime, and that is jail. Just jail. How many people in here have visited a jail? I've been to Rice Street in Fulton. It ain't a cakewalk. It's not supposed to be a cakewalk. But more than that, you've got challenging conditions, overcrowding, people sleeping in boats on the ground. You talk about security problems in jails and prisons, that's with doors that lock, let alone somebody sleeping out on the floor in a boat because there's no space. The spread of disease like MRSA during COVID obviously was a huge issue. Jail is one of the most blunt instruments we have short of prison. And the reason that we use jail in a cash bail setting is because somebody can't afford to pay to get out of it. But what is cash bail supposed to accomplish? What are bond decisions really about? They're about public safety. I went to law school. I was part of a clinic, did a clinic in law school to help do defense work. I've also done a prosecutorial internship. I don't know if some of y'all know that. I worked for federal prosecutors in 2011, and I've seen both sides of the V. And what you actually have in those settings is a prosecutor and defense attorney who are working together, and they're working with the judge. They want to manage these cases as a team, because what they want to do is in each case make the right outcome, make the right decision for that case. For that case. And that's a team effort that requires knowing your client, knowing your community, and knowing what our jail capacity is in that community as well. And the consequences of going to that jail as a temporary fix. Everybody involved in the criminal legal system knows that jail is too blunt of an instrument to fix chronic poverty, lack of access to education and work, lack of adequate health care. I mean, I commend the Chairman of Appropriations for speaking the truth on mental health in prisons today. We have so many diverse problems that are indicators, determinants of crime, that blunt instrument just does nothing to solve. And I think we all know intuitively that blunt instrument makes it worse. If you spend 2 days in jail, 3 days in jail, even just temporarily while you're awaiting bonding out, there are statistics on this. Defendants held in jail for 2 to 3 days after arrest, 39% more likely to be arrested on a new charge while the first case is pending than people who were released on the first day. Those jailed 4 to 7 days were 50% more likely to be arrested for new criminal activity than those released on the first day. Now, why is that? It's because if you're in jail, you can't go to your job. If you're in jail, you can't take care of your family. If you're in jail, you can't get treatment for an active medical condition. It is a blunt instrument that makes all of these social problems slightly worse. Now, what do we tell ourselves? We tell ourselves that the reason we use the instrument is because it's necessary to stop something worse from happening while somebody's awaiting trial. You know, I'm going to interrupt this speech to give you a quick ad for the American constitutional legal system. In the American constitutional legal system, you are innocent until proven guilty, which means if you are arrested but not convicted of a crime, you're sitting in jail, you are still legally innocent until you get to the end of that process. And that's something every liberty-loving people can appreciate. This ad brought to you by Liberty Lovers from the Well of America. Back to the regularly scheduled speech. We're using a blunt instrument on people not even convicted of crime. So is it worth it? What do we get when we throw people in jail pending adjudication? Well, here's what a bail determination decision is supposed to be about. There's 2 variables, only 2 variables that matter when you're making a bond determination, or that should matter. This is textbook law school boring stuff. Number 1, is the person likely to reoffend if they're not held in jail? Well, we already know that we're cranking up the dial on likelihood to reoffend the longer they stay in jail, so we better really be sure, if we want to put them in there at all, that that's going to be helpful. And number 2, are they a flight risk? Are they at risk of not coming to court, participate in the process? Those are the only 2 factors that a judge should be making a decision based on when deciding whether to take someone's liberty away before they are convicted of any crime. That is the calculus. Governor Nathan Deal understood that. Governor Nathan Deal tried his best to put in place programs, diversionary measures, so that we could avoid that blunt instrument, avoid ruining lives while we usher or shepherd people through this process. That policy worldview was bipartisan, and it crept into my heart before I even got in this building. And I found myself in a post-Nathan Deal era coming here to sing his praises. This is my 5th year doing it. God bless him. What we have seen in the last few years is a departure from that legacy. We are moving in the opposite direction that Governor Deal took us. Who in here has seen Governor Deal speak about accountability courts? Who has seen him shed a tear when he describes the life-changing, transformative process that these diversionary programs provide for people who are skidding on the bottom of our social safety net just to get by? You cannot be part of that process, the diversionary process, the process that believes in people, and not leave with your heart changed by it. The chaplain this morning spoke about 3 values over and over again. Do you guys remember? Compassion, kindness, mercy. And he said mercy a lot more than he said compassion and kindness. Mercy was the theme of this morning. And the reason there's a constitutional exception to the Establishment Clause that allows a chaplain of the day to stand up and make a sectarian prayer, the reason that exception exists because of the Kennedy opinion, author 5-4, the reason we can do that in here and not violate the First Amendment is because the founders deemed it important enough for a unifying, inspiring message to bring us together. Why? For the purposes of the business of the day. The founders wanted us to hear him say mercy so that we could get to SB 63 and think about mercy. It is not just an opportunity to shake a hand. It is a constitutional, and I mean part of our body, part of what we are doing when we work. We listen, we pray, because our conscience needs to inform these decisions. And I'm not asking you to let certain people out of jail pre-trial. I am asking you to think about whether making a CVS receipt full of offenses, those are really long for those of you who don't shop at CVS. They print out, those CVS receipts are so long. I mean, it's like, you hear, it just keeps going. A CVS receipt list of offenses that don't represent people who make us afraid, they just represent people we're mad at, to use Governor Deal's terminology. My colleague from the 2nd did a great job reviewing some of them. Possessing weed, forgery, financial transaction card fraud. I mean, that sucks. We don't want people doing it. But is that, when we show burning police cars on the news, are those the defendants we're worried about? A fray, schoolyard fight, unlawful assembly, scatter the protest? What about that person at a protest who goes and they're just watching around the corner? They're not the ones yelling everything, but they're near it. Maybe they didn't hear a police order, a lawful order to disperse. Maybe they get swept up in it. We're going to say that those people are obligated to be held on cash bail? Now, quick word on cash bail. I've been through this process now for several years in the House. We've heard testimony both ways on cash bail. That's another ideological issue. But let me ask you this. Why is it that we are not satisfied with judges making public safety determinations about whether people should stay in jail? Why is it we have to add an additional factor, which is whether they can pay for it? 85% of criminal defendants in the state of Georgia are represented by the Georgia Public Defender Standards Council, meaning they're indigent, meaning they make less than $12,000 a year. 85% of the people we're talking about in this system can't afford to get out of jail. Bondsmen don't cover every bond. Below $500, if you got a bond below $1,000, good luck finding a bondsman because they don't even work for that kind of peanuts and pennies. You got to be charged with something real serious before they get involved. So if you are one of these 85% of Georgians who can't afford to eat fast food for lunch on a budget, how are you going to make bond? I remember on the testimony on cash bail in the last few years, what was the response we'd always hear about cash bail? Well, the judge could always do a $1 bond. Okay, I interrupt this regularly scheduled speech for a brief ad. Superior Court judges of Georgia are committed to fighting for justice and equality in every jurisdiction in the state, and we will always make the best decision for our voters because we are elected. We are Superior Court judges who are elected, and we're responsive to our voters. We're proud to serve. Thank you for your attention. Okay, back to your regularly scheduled speech. Elected judges do not give $1 bonds. They just don't do it. People pretended they would. Oh, it's always easy. If they're indigent, just give them a $1 bond. I heard in an open committee hearing, House Judiciary, a couple of years ago, somebody finally said the quiet part out loud. Somebody made this argument. Nobody's going to give a $1 bond. That's bad optics. And the chairman of the committee said, that's the point, Representative. That's the point. The reason we reclassified the words OR bond, signature bond, to unsecured judicial release, the reason we did that in recent years is we wanted to scare judges. And we wanted to scare voters. Every word in that sentence has a purpose. Unsecured, ooh. Judicial, it's the judges, y'all. Don't forget, the judges are the ones doing this. Release, they're out in the community. Ooh. That's why we change the language, because we're trying to scare people into thinking that jail, that blunt instrument, that instrument that destroys access to healthcare, education, jobs, that instrument is a great one to keep using more and more and more and more and more. So as we moved in this cash bail direction, we started threatening judges with policy changes, squeezing them so that they would have to put more people behind bars. Why do you think these judges were making liberal bail decisions? Because their jails were overcrowded. Because they had to make tough decisions and realize, what am I going to do? Ruins this person's life for the next week, make them lose their job, and put them in a place where they got to sleep on the floor? Or trust that they can come back to court with the cooperation of their defense attorney, the prosecutor, and a team of people who cares? Too much generalization about crime means that we don't meet these people, we don't go to the places where the suffering happens and learn what's actually happened on the ground. It is easy as pie to stand up here and say, crime is up. Y'all hear crime is up, crime's up, crime's up. That's easy. Go look at the FBI crime data from COVID. Now that's data. Violent crime was up, domestic partnership, all kinds of issues, people being cooped up during COVID. But property crime was down during COVID. And let's look at 2023. Crime is down in Atlanta. Mayor Dickens has done an awesome job working with Republicans statewide. Crime is down. New precinct in Buckhead. So what is this narrative about crime's going up? Keep turning up the temperature, keep throwing people in jail, new offenses, CVS receipt. Where is it coming from? Why do we need it? Chaplain this morning said, how can you love a God you can't see without loving the people who you see every day? The reason it's hard for us in this chamber, just as a practical matter, to love the people in this system is because we don't see them every day. We legislate on them, we send them to jail, but we don't have to go to those criminal courts and talk to the defense attorney, talk to the prosecutor. We're not on that team of people who's trying to manage social crisis every day in our courts. So it's easy for us to be in here, to use words like domestic terrorism, to fund our political mail, to get reelected, and to ignore the human cost. The reason we're getting up here to bother you today is because we feel obligated to connect the dots, to connect that human cost, that feeling, that emotion, that breakdown in family and work and life, to connect it to this chamber. That's our job. And I ask you for a no vote today because it's time for this chamber to say, we liked what Governor Deal was doing. We understood that it's not a red thing or a blue thing, that voters in every district want improved public safety, a functional safety net, systems at work, accountability courts, diversion, cooperation, second chances. We want that more than we want a little bit of a percentage point boost in our contested primary. I love y'all. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I yield well. Actually, I'll yield for questions, Mr. President.
You do have a question. Senator from the second.
Does the senator yield?
I do.
Now, I am no attorney, but I look at public policy. And would the senator agree that under the official code of Georgia Annotated, section 40-13-63, it provides a legal penalty for the willful failure of any person to appear following the written promise contained on the citation and complaint served upon such person. This penalty may result in a fine not to exceed $200 or a period of confinement in jail not to exceed 3 days. Senator, my question is, would this now be required? I think that's a sign from the Lord to tell you about this bill.
Just one thing. We've had this happen before earlier this session.
Well, I believe that was one answer to Jim's question, but could you state your question again?
Absolutely. Senator, is it not true under OCGA 480-13-63, it says it provides a legal penalty for the willful failure of any person to appear following the written promise contained on the citation and complaint served upon such person. This penalty may result in a fine not to exceed $200 or a period of confinement in jail not to exceed 3 days. Senator, is it not true that by making failure to appear a bondable offense, you now will require a person who missed potentially traffic court to have to bond themselves out of jail when they appear again?
I think the senator makes a great point, and this is kind of example of what happens when we do this across the board legislating, when we're not on that team of people in that courthouse making the best decision for that case, and we're doing across the board rules, we're sending people to jail irrespective. I mean, we have judgments in policy, in code, that you can only stay in jail on something 3 days, 60 days, whatever, because we recognize maximum that it's just not that serious compared to some other stuff. That there's serious violent felonies over here, which I guess we're redefining, and there's the small stuff over here. Something like this, bail-restricted offenses, you throw it on that CVS receipt, that list, it's going to force us to use jail. It's not going to give the judges an option. So the senator is well informed.
Senator from the 50th, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I do.
You spoke a little bit about accountability courts, and in this bill, we actually included participation in an accountability court as a release from liability. Are you aware of that?
I am, and my understanding of what that provision does, Senator, is that it says that the surety shall be released from liability, meaning you can't collect against the bondsman in the event that you enroll in that court.
Thank you. And furthermore, with OR bonds, and what you were discussing with the senator from the second, participation in an accountability court, drug court, or any type of pretrial diversion would not be affected and would not preclude you, or participation in that would actually, do you understand my question?
That you would get out of this cash bail construct if you are able to participate.
Correct.
Is that the argument? Okay.
Yes.
The problem, though, Senator, is that we are turning up the heat and the pressure to create more pressure for jailing with all of these offenses, right, to the point that if we've got enrollment caps on accountability court, resource constraints, we're basically saying this outlet, this accountability court, this awesome thing that we should be using as a primary tool to address criminal activity, we're using it now here as a safety valve for a cash bail in the jail system that we're increasing the tension and the pressure on. So I think the senator and I agree, let's all go in that direction. But this is a bill that creates pressure on accountability courts. It doesn't create more opportunity in accountability courts. And I think for that reason, we need to reevaluate the approach to take a fundamentally different approach.
And then will the senator yield for one more?
Absolutely.
Is it true that in the state of Georgia, it is a requirement for judges to consider a defendant's financial situation a requirement prior to setting the amount of a bond or bail?
I agree with that, Senator, but again, I think we all feel required to talk about the issues on both sides of the V in here, but what ends up happening? Politics, political pressure ends up determining a lot of what happens in here, the same way it does for elected judges, which people who went backwards on cash bail in the last few years have recognized that pressure on judges is politically useful. And so I think, even if the judge is technically reciting all the factors that they consider, financial status, severity of offense, all that stuff, this bill is essentially going to force more judges to choose jail more often because of the pressures they face. And I think that's why we've got to send a clear message that we don't want to put judges in that hard position. We want to help them. We want to help those teams of lawyers and judges do the right thing in each individual case instead of making blanket rules. Mr. President, if there are no more questions, I would happily yield the well.
You have one more question.
I'll take one more question, Mr.
Senator from the second.
Okay, good to talk to you again.
Does the gentleman yield? Does the senator yield?
Sure do.
On line 152 of this bill, it says no person charged with a bail-restricted offense shall be eligible for release by any judge on an unsecured judicial release. Senator, is it not true that by making failure to appear a bond or bail-restricted offense, that means that a judge couldn't let you go on your own recognizance if you fail to show up for traffic court? Is that not true?
Mr. Senator, you and I violently agree that this bill changes the conditions surrounding failure to appear. And again, as we've been discussing, turns up the heat on our system and forces more people into jail. Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks, Senators. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Senator from the 56.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've got to serve as your chairman of public safety for many years now, and I've lost count of how many of our state prisons I have visited. And as you go through those prisons, you'll find that, according to each and every inmate, everyone is innocent. Just ask them, they will tell you. Until the warden or someone else starts listing the offenses of what that person did to get into that prison. It mystifies me, to be perfectly candid with you, that some folks are so concerned about prisoners and criminals and not victims and citizens. Without question, we have had some of the worst crime in decades. The worst crime. We should be mortified that people are afraid to leave their homes. They're afraid to get into their cars that might be parked on the street. They're afraid to go to a shopping mall. We have seen countless problems over the last 2.5 years. We've watched a young mom go out for a morning jog to be murdered. We've watched a young child get shot and killed because of criminal street gangs shooting at each other and bullets flying everywhere. And yet we keep coming back to the poor criminals and prisoners. What about the victims? Our first job here is to protect the public. I was able to bring in the new Atlanta police chief, who's doing a phenomenal job. And by the way, so is the new mayor. He's doing a great job too. And he showed us where the crime is coming from. The ongoing repeat offenders through that criminal justice revolving door. I love our judges, but some of them wanted to be a social worker and some of them wanted to be a legislator. And there's a solution for that. Resign and either run to be a state senator or state house member or go into the social work field. We have a responsibility to protect the people of this state. And I'm very proud of the senator for the 29th for leading that charge. Thank you. I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Senator from the 7th, you wish to rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today in opposition of Senate Bill 63. I believe this bill is mean-spirited and does not reflect the values of our communities in our state. I believe that this bill, 1, unfairly targets Georgia's poor. 2, it erodes due process and undermines the criminal legal system. And 3, makes Georgia less safe by making it more likely that people will end up back in the criminal justice system. This bill unfairly targets Georgia's poor. And as we all know, our poor are already much likely to become involved with the criminal justice system. At the point in which bond is being considered in a felony case, a judge has determined that the defendant is not a significant risk to fail to appear to be a threat to the community. It's just about finding a bond amount that is reasonable for the defendant considering their financial ability to pay. If you are poor, any amount is too much. So this is unnecessary and cruel. This bill would also erode due process. According to reports issued by the Council on Criminal Justice Reform, which involved a years-long process that included district attorneys and judges, incarcerating individuals pre-trial caused defendants to plead guilty at higher rates and incur harsher sentences. The size of your bank account should not determine the penalty you pay for a crime. This bill also makes Georgia less safe. The council's report also highlighted that individuals held for just 2 or 3 days pre-trial were nearly 40% more likely to reoffend than those who are released on the first day. The longer defendants are held pre-trial, the more likely they are to reoffend. It is also worth noting that there is a substantial cost to sheriffs for unnecessarily detaining defendants pre-trial. This cost was a major reason for the work done by the council in recommending reducing Georgia's reliance on cash bail. I understand the legitimate concerns that went into this bill, but I do not believe this bill will address them. This is too important to get wrong. We must look at the evidence. This bill and others demonstrate a dangerous new habit of using the criminal justice system to silence those who would criticize Georgia's laws through nonviolent civil disobedience. This must stop. I urge my colleagues to join me in opposing this bill. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Does any other senator wish to rise and speak for or against the bill? Would the author of the bill like to close the debate?
Thank you, Mr. President. I enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed the conversation from individuals who have looked at crime from their law offices, and they've looked at crime from whatever third, fourth, fifth, or sixth floor that their profession happened to work out of. But where I get most of my information are from the men and women that are out there doing the job. And where I get the rest of my information from is somebody who, again, has been failed to be mentioned by anybody that came up here after that. That's the victims of crimes. Somebody talked about how judges are more worried about getting elected than setting bonds that they think are fair. I don't think there's anybody in this room that would think domestic violence is a simple crime that doesn't cause damage to families. But since we passed bail bond reform 2 years ago, would you be surprised to know that a judge who has to be elected would set a bond on domestic violence at 10 cents? Would you? I'm not shocked. I'm not upset. The judge looked at the circumstances, I assume. He or she decided that a violent act against another person, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, cohabit, who happened to cohabit the same space possibly, circumstances, whether it was financial or whatever, was 10 cents. And that person, if they didn't have a dime in their pocket, probably called somebody and have them come bring a dime. And being in law enforcement and having responsibilities that included a large jail, sadly, I hate to point out that bonding companies showed up for bonds of $150, $250, $500. There was no flashing sign over the door that said, do not call bonding companies if your bond is not $1,000 or more. But I understand, because when you have an agenda, and that agenda has got you locked into place, then that's the most important thing. And I've heard the same rhetoric about poverty. There he is again going after poor people. I hate to point this out to you, but the most victims of crime are not the wealthy, especially violent crime. They're the poor. Those are the ones we're trying to protect. So the poverty argument, I hate to say when it comes to being tough on crime or giving fair bonds, I'm afraid the tank is empty, because poor people do not want the individuals who assault them, who steal their stuff, who break into their cars, to be handed a citation so that individual come back the next day and either beat them up, because when I was in school, we used the same tools to settle arguments as my friend from the second did. But once we became adults, if you did that, that's violence and you go to jail. And I'll tell you, people die from fists, people die from feet, people die from elbows, and as we all know, people die from being choked and other things that come along with violence. Got a good friend of mine up in the gallery, Josh, who's a successful businessman. And let me tell you, Josh got out of bond in Fulton County on a signature bond. He had 10 felony counts and a California driver's license. And you know what that signature bond did to Josh? It helped him accumulate a lot more felonies and put him on a fast track to prison. And that's where he ended up. 2 things saved Josh, and I'm quoting Josh, I'm not quoting Randy. 2 things saved him: jail and Jesus. He said if he had not been incarcerated, he would have never found Jesus, which I am going to settle everybody's discussion now. Apparently Jesus doesn't have a bond because everybody finds him in jail. But he found him there, and Jesus saved his life, along with being incarcerated. Somebody brought up human cost. Amazingly, we put human cost on one side of the scale and leave the other side empty. Human cost apparently is a price put on individuals when their time is interrupted, when they are incarcerated for choosing to violate a law. These are not mistakes. These are not unintentional acts. These are people choosing to violate the law. A friend of mine said we have to connect the dots. Well, if you want to connect the dots, make sure all the dots are on the paper. Make sure you're looking at every dot. And somebody brought up time to start giving second chances. Well, I promise you, my colleague from the 17th and myself have passed more legislation in the last 4 years to give felons second chances than most people in this building. Whether it was giving them the opportunity as being on probation and parole, being convicted felons to go out and start their own businesses, whether it was giving them opportunities to not be discriminated against, whether it was giving them opportunities to get jobs in financial institutions, we have done that regardless of what their felons were, regardless of how long they had on probation and parole. This is good policy. But let me tell you, if you're going to weigh it, put the crime victims up there with the criminals. Somebody talked about the amendment that's coming up, criminal trespass, breaking into somebody, busting windows out. That should be okay. Theft by taking, stealing your stuff should be a citation. Theft by deception, lying to you and stealing your money, citation. Purchasing heroin, selling cocaine, citation. Let's do it. A fray we've talked into. Somebody punches you at the gas station because you got to the pump before they did, citation. What's the big deal? Unlawful assembly. Was that a police car I saw burning a few weeks ago? Somebody remind me. And terroristic threats. We always like to stop and think terroristic threats is just somebody saying some little quick thing, I'll beat you up, I'll get you. But I promise you, go back and look at the terroristic threats that we're talking about. Look at the serious terroristic threats that people are charged when they show up to the courthouse with a gun in their pocket, or when they go back to their ex-wife's house and they tell her they're going to get her and her boyfriend as they stand on the front porch. If we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it. And let's talk about the full picture. We have seen tough on crime helps. We see judges who have to get elected setting bonds. I've got a stack on my desk up there where judges set bonds at $15 for obstruction, for simple battery. It's working. Don't be confused by those who champion just for the criminals. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
The senator has yielded the well. The previous question has been ordered. However, we got the senator from 37th. What purpose? The senator from 37th. What purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, I am parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
If I were to want to offer an amendment that I think might be well received by the body, would I make a motion to for unanimous consent to suspend the rules that an amendment can be offered? Would that be the posture parliamentary-wise?
You can ask for unanimous consent, Senator, if you are wanting to, because the previous question has been ordered.
Yes, sir.
And if you wanted to ask for unanimous consent for the previous question to be reversed, and so your amendment could be offered and debated, yes, you can do that, Senator.
Okay, Mr. President, I'd like to offer unanimous consent before I ask for that parliamentary inquiry. The amendment I would offer, isn't it true, would take this question we debated about failure to appear and would say that a second or subsequent offense of failure to appear would require that someone be taken to jail, but a first offense would still.
If you're asking the question, would it be received pretty well by the entire body? I would assume, listening to the debate, that it would be received pretty well by the entire body.
Thank you, Mr. President. Isn't it further true that the author and the chair of the committee have signed on to this amendment?
And the senator knows what he speaks.
Mr. President, I'd like to ask unanimous consent of the body to rescind the
rescind the previous question.
That this amendment might be offered, Mr. President.
The senator has asked that the previous question be rescinded for an amendment to be offered and debated. Is there objection to his motion? Without objection, it is rescinded. So now we will have our amendment that you and the author of the bill have put forward. Secretary, read the caption.
Senator Setzler of the 37th and others offer the following amendment, Amendment 2, to amend Senate Committee Substitute to Senate Bill 63 by inserting the following after 77 on line 122, second or subsequent offense of. Mr. President, that completes the order.
I recognize the senator from the 37th to speak to his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just again, once as has been discussed earlier, this simply provides that a second or subsequent offense would be subject to the provisions of this bill, but a first offense would be would again be handled as is today. Would maintain status quo. Ask for your support.
Senator has yielded to the well. Would any other senator wish to speak for or against this bill? Hearing none, the previous question is ordered. We're going to take up our amendments here. On Amendment 1, offered by the senator from the 2nd, is there objection to Amendment 1? There is objection to Amendment 1. We're just going to cut to the chase and go to the machine here. Secretary will unlock the machine. Those in favor vote aye. Those who oppose vote no. The bell is not working, ladies and gentlemen, so red or green button. On the adoption of the amendment, the yeas are 23 and the nays are 31, and this amendment has failed. Now moving on to the second amendment offered by the senator from the 37th. Hold on, the senator from the 31st. What
Thank you, Mr. President. Would like to excuse the senator from the 25th for business outside the chamber.
Without objection, the senator from the 25th is excused. The question is on the second amendment here. Is there objection to the second amendment being added to the underlying bill? No objection, and that amendment is added. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Hearing none, the committee substitute as amended is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. Unlock the machine. Senator from the 2nd, for what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, is it not true that throughout my entire debate I am not about excusing the most violent offenders, but those who are non-violent offenders who needed a second opportunity to not have to sit in jail should they not be able to afford to post the bond, because those most violent people do belong in jail and in prison? Is that not true, Mr. President?
I believe the senator from the 2nd is passionate about what he speaks. Senator from the 29th, for what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, is it not true that the vast majority of crime victims in the state of Georgia are people living in poverty already, and most of the times the property that they have is little that they can afford to lose, but it's taken anyway?
Senator is passionate of his words. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 31, the nays are 23. This having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Moving on to Senate Bill 50. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 50 by Senator Burns of the 23rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to elementary and secondary education so as to provide that local boards of education which operate a school with grades 9 through 12 may provide instruction in lifeguarding and aquatic safety to provide for Carnegie Unit curriculum credits. The Senate Committee on Education and Youth recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Dixon of the 45th District Chairman. Mr. President, that completes the order.
I recognize the senator from the 23rd speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I'm going to spare you my attempt at both theatrics and oratory. We're going to deal with business. Senate Bill 50 is a bill that allows but does not require local boards of education to offer lifeguarding and aquatic safety programs. I want to thank my good friend, the senator from the 48th, as well as my good friend from the 45th for their help and work in this legislation. If you will quickly go through the bill, you will notice the word may. I point out on 22, not shall, but may provide instruction in lifeguarding and aquatic safety. That's 22. And in verse 27, they may establish a curriculum. Now, if they do establish a curriculum, they've got to follow certain standards, and those standards are set by nationally known organizations, including in lines 32 through 37, like American Red Cross, American Lifeguard Association, Starguard Life, Elite, and Stop Drowning. So the bottom line is this enables students to become lifeguards from high school. The majority of lifeguards are 16 to 22. There's a dramatic shortage of lifeguards. These students get 1/2 of a credit for that activity, but they are not required to be certified, but they may be certified. Last thing I'd point out, Mr. President, is on line 81. You notice that this simply adds lifeguarding and aquatic safety to the focused programs of study. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield for questions, or I yield well.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you. I yield.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against this measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to the agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54, and the nays is the rules chairman back there in the back. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Moving on, Senate Bill 110. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 110 by Senator Walker of the 20th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 33 of the OCGA relating to general provisions for insurance so as to establish the Back the Blue Fund that distributes voluntary contributions made through motor vehicle insurance policies for the purpose of increasing the pay to or enhancing the benefits of law enforcement officers in this state. The Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Walker of the 20th District Chairman. Mr. President, that completes the order.
I recognize the senator from the 24th, senator from the 20th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, we've heard a lot of discussion this morning and now this afternoon about what to do with criminals and crime, and a lot of passionate debate on both sides of the issue with bail bonds. I do think, however, that we can all agree that we want our communities to be safe. And in fact, that's the number one concern that I hear in my district is crime, the rise in crime we've seen nationwide and in Georgia, and particularly violent crime involving young people and violent gang activity. We all want our communities to be safe, and the chief law enforcement officer, the man or woman on the front line that's charged in our Georgia Constitution with keeping our communities safe is our local sheriff. And this bill, which is an idea that was born by the Lieutenant Governor, we worked on this some last year, is a way for citizens of Georgia to voluntarily, and I stress voluntarily, in a small way, in a convenient manner, support our sheriff departments. I know you all are probably ready to go to lunch, but I do think this is worthy of taking a little bit of time to give you some background. The Constitution of the state of Georgia establishes the office of sheriff in each of the state's 159 counties. They who hold the office are unique from all other law enforcement officers as they are elected constitutional officers. They are the chief law enforcement officer of each county and not only have the authority to enforce the law, sheriffs have the duty to preserve the peace and to protect the lives, persons, property, health, and morals of the people. State law and the courts have said that sheriffs are locally elected agents of the state who must enforce the laws, operate the county jail, as well as secure and serve the courts. In order to perform the many essential and oftentimes dangerous tasks associated with these mandates, sheriffs must employ and manage deputies, jail officers, and support staff. Deputy sheriffs and jail officers serve under the authority of the sheriff by investigating, arresting, and detaining criminal actors, by managing inmates in the custody of the county jail, registering and tracking sex offenders, providing courthouse security, serving civil process, transporting mental patients, and performing many other functions. As a result of these many and varied responsibilities and related tasks, deputy sheriffs and jail officers have to be versatile, well-trained to handle very difficult and dangerous situations, oftentimes unexpectedly and at a moment's notice. That's why it's critical that our sheriffs are able to hire and retain well-trained, experienced, ethical, and discerning deputies and jailers. It's critical to the sheriff's ability to effectively fulfill their duties and to keep our communities safe. This has become increasingly difficult and challenging for our sheriffs. The Georgia Sheriff's Association conducted a law enforcement compensation reform report and updated it in 2021. They got a response back from 81 of our 159 sheriffs, and of those 81 counties, there were 959 full-time deputy sheriff vacancies in those 81 counties, 959. There were 760 jailer vacancies in these 81 counties. And the problem has steadily gotten worse. That's a 13% increase in vacancies from the 2016 report. And the reasons for these vacancies are, it's not all about compensation, but a lot of it is the compensation and the benefits. Part of it too is just the way society has kind of villainized law enforcement and all the difficult challenges they have to face daily, dealing with oftentimes mental health crises and things like that, and all the violence. I want you all to listen to these figures because it's pretty staggering to me. Georgia lags the Southeast in sheriff, deputy, and jailer compensation. All 5 states that surround us have significantly higher compensation, average compensation for their sheriff, deputies, and jailers. The average compensation in 2021 for a Georgia sheriff deputy average was $38,421. The average compensation for a jail officer, $32,280. We have some counties paying sheriff deputies as little as $13 an hour. We have some counties paying jailers as little as $10 an hour. We have sheriff deputies and jailers that qualify for SNAP benefits, so they're on public assistance trying to make ends meet. What this bill does is it directs the Insurance Commissioner of Georgia to prescribe a plan to require the auto insurance carriers in Georgia to set up a vehicle for policyholders of auto insurance. It could be commercial or personal auto insurance, to donate $3, less than the cost of a cup of coffee, to the Back the Blue Fund. The insurance companies will collect this money. They will remit it to the insurance commissioner annually, and the insurance commissioner will distribute these funds to our 159 sheriffs to be used to improve the compensation for these underpaid sheriff deputies and jailers, or to improve their benefit package. It's a voluntary program. It's a way for us to show support, Georgia citizens that are civic minded and want to support our sheriffs, to conveniently help them hire and retain quality law enforcement personnel. Mr. President, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I ask for your favorable consideration of this great idea from the Lieutenant Governor.
You do have a couple questions, Senator. Senator from 21st, will you take
Thank you, Mr. President. Lieutenant Governor, Floor Leader, will you yield?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I like this bill, and I think it's great for sheriffs, but I don't know that it goes far enough. I've got a police chief and a few police chiefs in my cities. Can they, if this is a successful program, do you see them in the future being able to participate in something like this, or even the state troopers?
Senator, I appreciate it, seatmate. Good question. There are approximately 3.5 million registered vehicles in Georgia. So we think there's probably about 2 million or so auto insurance policies in Georgia. We don't have any idea that, because this is a voluntary program, we don't have any idea how successful it will be. I mean, it might raise, you know, $500,000. It might raise $2 or $3 million. I think if we find, Senator, that this is successful, we certainly would be happy to and want to expand this to allow other police agencies to participate. but essentially just to get started with it and see how it works, and if it is effective and successful, we'd like to start it with our constitutional officers that are sheriffs. Yes, sir.
Senator Yield?
Yes, sir.
So if, let's say, $500,000 is collected, that'll be divided by 159 counties and sent equally to each county?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Senator from the 15th, the Dean of the Senate.
Senator Yield.
Yes, sir.
In line with the former senator's question, when that money is distributed to the various sheriffs, is it equally distributed to the members in that department, regardless of whether they are staff that goes out or
yes,
otherwise?
sir. It'll be divided equally between 159 sheriffs. Yes, sir.
And the personnel of each county.
Well, it goes to the sheriff and it's stipulated that it be used for compensation or benefits.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator from the 2nd.
Does the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
I definitely want to support this bill. I just have questions as relates to the oversight of this bill. Who will audit such funds to ensure that the funds that have been received will be distributed, a review period? Will the senator from the 19th have the opportunity to review these funds to make sure that they've been appropriately dispersed?
Yeah.
Or will it just be under the Fire and Insurance Commissioner, and we just trust that he will do the right thing? And the reason for my question, Senator, is when we talk about equity, especially, I don't have a full-service sheriff department in Chatham County. My sheriff is not full service. But one of the things that I found is that we send a lot up, but we don't see a lot coming back down sometimes. And so I just have concerns about it coming back down.
Good question, Senator. The insurance commissioner will have to keep detailed records of this money and accounting for it, and he is subject to audit by the Department of Audits and Accounts like any state agency is. Yes, sir.
You have no further questions, Senator.
Thank you, and I appreciate the Lieutenant Governor giving me the opportunity to carry this, and I ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you, Senator. I remember carrying that bill, Senator, through your committee last year, matter of fact. I got it out of your committee, but for some reason I couldn't get it through rules last year. I ran into a little problem here. I don't know. I think politics got in the way. Does any senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary unlock the machine. Senator from the 27th, you have a question?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that your floor leader is a phenomenal legislator with whom you are well pleased?
The senator knows of what he speaks right there. Senator from the 19th, what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Since the senator from the 20th has now been able to get this bill through the Senate, as it appears, and last year you stated you had some difficulty, does that mean that the senator from the 20th has more juice than our lieutenant governor?
He's got more juice with the lieutenant governor than I had with the one last year. Senator from the 2nd, for what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
Yeah, state your inquiry.
Mr. President, is it not true that I'm going to vote for this bill because I do support law enforcement and the work that they do in our communities, and I do think that we are not doing enough to raise their salaries in this state?
Senator knows of what he speaks. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52 and the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. All right. Good job, Senator. Moving on. Senate Bill 121. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 121 by Senator Anderson of the 24th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 60 of Title 36 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated, relating to general provisions applicable to counties and municipal corporations so as to prohibit local governments from denying the drilling, servicing, or repair of new or existing water wells on single-family residential and farm properties. The Senate Committee on Natural Resources and the Environment recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Anderson of the 24th District Chairman. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize Senator from the 24th, our Natural Resources Chair, the farmer from Columbia County.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is a bill to where any property owner that owns it 1 acre or more has the right to choose to be able to drill a well on their property. This gives the great people, the great state of Georgia, the opportunity and the freedom to make a decision. Any questions? I yield. I ask you to vote for the bill.
You do have a question, Senator?
Right.
No, he's waved it off. You do not have a question, Senator.
Vote for the great people, the great state of Georgia.
Senator for the 15th, you wish to rise? You good? All right. Senator from the 19th, state your, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent we excuse the senator from the 17th.
Without objection, the senator from the 17th is excused. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to a report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor signify by saying aye, yay. All those opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53 and the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Moving on, Senate bill or Senate Resolution 76. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Resolution number 76 by Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd and others, a resolution encouraging any organization that administers or conducts high-risk athletic activities for children 14 and under on property owned, leased, managed, or maintained by the state of Georgia to make accessible to athletic directors and coaches a training program covering important safety information for prevention and treatment of injuries to our young athletes. The Senate Committee on Children and Families recommends that this resolution do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd District Chairman. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Senator from 31st, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, I'd like to excuse the senator from the 28th.
Without objection, the senator from 28th is excused. I now recognize the senator from 32nd to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. For those of you who saw the presentation from the Senator of the 39th earlier today of the young man whose life was saved by someone knowing CPR, you'll understand why this bill is important. This is designed to help with an epidemic of youth sports injuries across the country, including Georgia. We've seen things happen in Georgia with everything from heat stroke to concussions to sudden cardiac arrest. We have thousands of volunteer coaches in Georgia for 14 and under sports, with less than half being trained in CPR, basic first aid, and injury prevention and management. Many of these 14 and under sports activities are taking place on government property, which causes a liability risk for the facility as well as the coach. We know that training coaches can prevent injuries and lead to better outcomes. There are training programs that have been developed that are inexpensive and thorough that have been approved by the Georgia Park and Recreation Association. The programs include emergency preparedness, information about concussions, heat illness, and so on. The resolution simply encourages organizations that administer youth sports activities to make these programs available to our volunteer coaches in Georgia. This training is already happening in Little League and some other organizations, and it doesn't cost the coaches anything. Letters of support were received in committee from the Georgia High School Association, the National Council on Youth Sports, and the bill is also supported by Georgia Parks and Rec. This bill is not a mandate, and it's a step in the direction of protecting our young athletes, as well as the volunteer coaches that work with them. Be happy to answer any questions.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you, I yield.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none, and the previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none. Reporting of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor of the resolution will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the adoption resolution, the yeas are 51, nays are 0. The resolution has received the requisite constitutional majority, therefore is adopted. I recognize the majority leader for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate stand adjourned pursuant to Senate Resolution number 6 until 10 a.m. Monday, February 27th.
And the majority leader has moved. Secretary, read the announcements.
The Rules Committee meeting will happen upon adjournment in 450 of the Capitol. The Children Families Committee meeting will happen at 2 p.m. in 307 CLOB. The Retirement Committee meeting will happen at 3 p.m. in Mezzanine 1 of the Capitol. The Regulated Industries Committee meeting will happen at 3 p.m. in 450 of the Capitol. The Public Safety Committee meeting is canceled. The Economic Development and Tourism Committee meeting will happen at 4 p.m. in Mezzanine 1 of the Capitol. The Judiciary Committee meeting will happen at 5 p.m. in 307 CLOB. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Thank you. Please, 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 everyone go to your committee meetings. It's very important. We're in the home stretch before crossover, and so we need to have quorums and we need to have everybody engaged. Also on your desk, there is a card for Fix Georgia Pets on your desk. And I won't tell, I can assure you it came from my house because I've got somebody who's a member of this board here, but I don't want to put any pressure on you, but if you were to give, you'd be in good standings like the senator from the 20th, you know, so, but no, but anyways, I just want to make that announcement. Y'all have a great rest of the day, and like I say, head to your committee meetings. Thank y'all very much. All those in favor of the motion from the majority leader signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Have a good day. We're adjourned.